The ship descended through clouds of purple gas, and Marcus Chen pressed his face against the window like a child seeing snow for the first time. Below him, the Galactic University of Xiverion Prime stretched across an entire continent. Towers of living crystal reached toward the sky. Rivers of light flowed between buildings that had stood for 12,000 years. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. It was also the place where everyone wanted him to fail. Marcus was 24 years old. He had short black hair, tired eyes, and the kind of smile that appeared when he was nervous. Right now, he was very nervous. He was the first human ever admitted to the greatest university in the known galaxy. He was also, according to most species in that galaxy, a dangerous animal that had somehow learned to wear clothes. The transport pod landed softly on a platform of white stone. When the doors opened, Marcus stepped out and immediately felt the difference. The gravity here was lighter than Earth. The air tasted sweet and clean. Everything felt gentle, careful, and soft. He had read about this. Most civilized worlds were like this. Earth was not. Earth was what the galaxy called a Class 7 death world. The classification system went from 1 to 10. Most species evolved on Class 1 or Class 2 planets, where the weather was mild, the predators were few, and the ground did not shake without warning. Earth sat near the dangerous end of the scale. It had hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes, and ice ages. It had bacteria that could kill in hours, and animals that hunted for pleasure. It had a gravity that crushed bones over time, and a sun that burned unprotected skin. Humans had evolved on this world. They had survived it, and this fact terrified the rest of the galaxy. A group of students stood near the platform, watching Marcus arrive. They were Veluan, a species of tall beings with silver skin and large black eyes. They did not come closer. They simply watched, the way someone might watch a dangerous insect that had escaped its container. Marcus raised his hand in greeting. "Hello," he said. "I am Marcus Chen. I am happy to meet you." The Veluan students turned and walked away without a word. Marcus let his hand fall. He took a deep breath. He had expected this. The orientation documents had warned him. Humans were new to the galactic community. Most species had never seen one in person. They only knew the stories, the wars, the violence, the impossible survival rate on a planet that should have killed everything on it. He picked up his bag and followed the directions on his datapad toward the administration building. The hallways were wide and filled with students of dozens of species. Some floated. Some walked on many legs. Some seemed to be made of light itself. All of them moved away from Marcus as he passed. The crowd parted around him like water around a stone. He heard whispers in languages his translator could not fully process, but he caught some words. Deathworlder, predator, dangerous. The administration office was a circular room with walls that displayed slowly moving images of space. Behind a curved desk sat a Korthari official. The Korthari were among the oldest species in the galaxy. They had skin like crystal that shifted colors with their emotions. This one was showing a pale blue, which Marcus's research told him meant discomfort. "Marcus Chen," the official said, reading from a screen. "Human, Earth, age 24 standard years." The official paused. "You are aware that most students here have studied for centuries before admission?" "Yes," Marcus said. "You are aware that your species has never produced a scientist of galactic recognition?" "Yes." "You are aware that your average lifespan is considered brief by our standards?" Marcus kept his smile steady. "I am aware that humans live about 80 years. Sometimes more, sometimes less." The Korthari's skin flickered to a darker shade. 80 years. I have furniture older than that." The official pushed a data chip across the desk. "Your room assignment and class schedule. You have been placed in Storage Bay 7. We apologize for the inconvenience. All standard rooms are occupied." Marcus took the chip. He did not point out that he had seen dozens of empty rooms during his walk through the campus. "Thank you," he said. "I appreciate the opportunity to study here." The official said nothing more. Marcus left. Storage Bay 7 was located at the edge of the campus, far from the main buildings. It was a metal box with a small window, a bed that was slightly too short, and a bathroom that had been added recently and without much care. The walls hummed with the sound of machinery from the building next door. Marcus set down his bag. He sat on the bed. He looked at the small window that showed a view of a garbage processing facility. Then he laughed. He laughed because it was funny. He laughed because it was sad. He laughed because he had traveled 400 light years from home to sleep in a closet because people were afraid of him. And he laughed because he was not going to quit. Not now. Not ever. He had fought too hard to be here. Back on Earth, Marcus had been nobody special. He was smart, but Earth had many smart people. He had worked hard, but Earth had many hard workers. What made him different was his stubbornness. When the Galactic Integration Act passed, allowing humans to apply for exchange programs, 10,000 people had submitted applications. The tests had been brutal. The interviews had been worse. And in the end, Marcus had been chosen. Not because he was the smartest or the most qualified, but because, as one evaluator had written, this one does not know how to stop. He unpacked his few belongings. A photograph of his family. A small plant from Earth that the customs officials had examined for 3 hours before allowing through. And a notebook filled with handwritten equations. Marcus liked to write by hand. It helped him think. The next morning, he went to his first class. The lecture hall was enormous. Hundreds of students sat in floating seats arranged in a great spiral. At the center, a holographic display showed complex mathematical formulas. The professor was a Korthari named Velthrani, whose crystalline skin was a deep violet that suggested authority and pride. Marcus found a seat at the back. The students near him quietly moved away, leaving empty spaces around him like a quarantine zone. Professor Velthrani noticed the movement. His eyes, which were like pools of liquid silver, found Marcus in the crowd. He paused his lecture. The professor said, "Our human has arrived. The Deathworlder." He spoke the word the way someone might say, disease. "Tell me, human, on your world, do you study mathematics? Or do you spend all your time fighting for survival and reproducing?" Some students made sounds that might have been laughter. Marcus felt his face grow warm, but he kept his voice calm. "We study mathematics. I particularly enjoy problem solving." "Problem solving," Velthrani repeated. "How charming. Perhaps you can solve the problem of why the council thought it wise to send a mayfly to study among immortals." More laughter. Marcus said nothing. He simply opened his notebook and began to write. That night, he walked through the campus alone. The twin moons of Xiverian Prime cast silver light across the crystal towers. It was quiet and peaceful and beautiful, and Marcus felt more alone than he had ever felt in his life. He stopped at a building called the Grand Hall. Inside, he knew, was a famous display. He had read about it during his journey here. He entered. The hall was empty at this hour. In the center, floating in a column of soft light, was a holographic display of equations. They twisted and turned, like a living thing. They were beautiful and complex and completely unsolved. A plaque beneath the display read, "The Vanthari Proof. Unsolved for 1,000 years. The key to unified field theory. IT2. Marcus stood before it for a long time. He did not understand most of it. Not yet. But something in those equations called to him. Something that felt like a puzzle waiting to be broken. Outside, 2 professors passed by the window. Marcus could not hear them, but their conversation was about him. "How long do you think the human will last?" one asked. The other made a gesture of dismissal. "1 semester, perhaps 2. These creatures are not built for serious thought." They walked away, never knowing that inside the Grand Hall, a Deathworlder was staring at an impossible problem and feeling, for the first time since his arrival, something like hope. 3 weeks passed, and Marcus learned the true shape of the galaxy's academic world. The Korthari controlled physics. They had been studying the universe for 50,000 years, and they believed that their methods were perfect. Their science was elegant, beautiful, and precise. They looked down on species who approached problems differently. The Veluan controlled mathematics. They were a species of pure logic, born with an instinct for numbers the way birds were born with an instinct to fly. They considered themselves the foundation upon which all other sciences rested. The Synth Collective, a group of linked artificial minds, controlled computational theory. They could process information faster than any biological species. They did not feel emotions, but they felt something like pride in their processing power. And then there were the lesser species, the ones who served, the ones who cleaned, the ones who were allowed to attend the university only because the law required it, not because anyone expected them to succeed. Marcus, the human, fell somewhere below even those. His classes were difficult in a strange way. The coursework assumed that students had centuries to learn. A single topic might be spread across 50 years of study. The professors spoke slowly, repeated concepts many times, and moved at a pace that made Marcus want to scream. But he did not scream. He adapted. He began to read ahead. He found that he could absorb information much faster than his classmates, not because he was smarter, but because he had no choice. Humans did not have centuries. They had decades. Every moment mattered. Every hour was precious. His brain had evolved to learn quickly or die. This was the gift of the Death World. This was what the galaxy did not understand. On Earth, the slow learners did not survive. The ones who took too long to recognize danger, too long to find food, too long to solve problems, they died. Generation after generation, humans had been shaped by this pressure. They learned to think fast. They learned to take risks. They learned to break rules when rules did not work. The professors noticed something strange in Marcus's work. His answers were often correct, but his methods made no sense. He skipped steps that should not be skipped. He made connections that should not exist. He reached the right destination by walking through walls instead of following the path. Professor Velthrani called it cognitive violence. He meant it as an insult. Marcus wrote the phrase in his notebook and circled it. He thought it was interesting. One evening, Marcus sat alone in the dining hall, eating a meal that had been specially prepared for his strange Terran biology. The other students avoided his table. He had grown used to this silence. Then someone sat across from him. She was small. Her skin was a soft gray, and her eyes were large and golden. Her species was called the Kiravari, and Marcus knew almost nothing about them, except that they were considered unintelligent by galactic standards. They served as workers and assistants, rarely as students. "Hello," she said. Her voice was quiet and a little nervous. "I am Kira 7. I have been watching you." Marcus looked up from his food. "Watching me? You walk differently," Kira 7 said. "The others walk like they have forever. You walk like you are being chased. I find this interesting." Marcus smiled. It was the first genuine smile he had felt in weeks. "I am Marcus. I am from Earth. I know. Everyone knows. They say you are dangerous. Do you think I am dangerous?" Kira 7 tilted her head, considering. "I think you are alone. I am also alone. Perhaps dangerous and alone are similar things." From that day, they were friends. Kira 7 was not stupid. Marcus learned this quickly. She was simply different. Her species had been classified as low intelligence because they did not think the way Korthari or Veluan thought. They did not follow straight lines of logic. They followed feelings, intuitions, and connections that others could not see. Marcus understood this. Humans were the same way. "The professors hate my work," Kira 7 told him one night as they studied together in Storage Bay 7. "They say my answers are lucky guesses. They say I do not show proper methodology. But your answers are right? Usually. But they still mark me down because I cannot explain the steps. The steps happen inside my head too fast. I just... No." Marcus nodded. "I have the same problem. They call my thinking chaotic." Kira 7 made a sound that was her species' version of a laugh. "Maybe chaotic is not bad. Maybe chaotic is just another word for fast." Marcus thought about this often. He began to study the Vanthari proof in his spare time. He visited the Grand Hall whenever he could, standing before the floating equations and letting them fill his mind. He did not understand them fully. Not yet. But he felt something when he looked at them. A kind of itch. A sense that something was wrong with the way the problem was being asked. The Vanthari proof was a problem in unified field theory. It attempted to connect all the forces of the universe, gravity, electromagnetism, the strong force, the weak force, into a single, elegant framework. For 1,000 years, the greatest minds in the galaxy had tried to solve it. For 1,000 years, they had failed. The Korthari approached it with careful, methodical precision. They built elaborate mathematical structures, beautiful towers of logic, and each time the towers fell, the Veluan attacked it with pure calculation. They processed millions of variables, searching for the perfect combination, and each time they found nothing. The Synth Collective ran simulations beyond counting. They tested every known approach, every combination, every possibility. And still, the proof remained unsolved. Marcus stared at the equations and felt the itch grow stronger. What are you looking for? Kira 7 asked him one evening when she found him in the grand hall. I do not know, Marcus admitted. But something is wrong with this problem. Wrong how? I cannot explain. It is like when you look at a picture and something feels off, but you cannot say what. The picture is beautiful. The colors are perfect, but something is not right. Kira 7 stood beside him, studying the equations. My grandmother used to say that sometimes you cannot solve a puzzle because you are holding it upside down. Marcus looked at her. What does that mean? I do not know. She was old and often said strange things, but I always remembered it. That night, Marcus could not sleep. He lay in his small bed in Storage Bay 7 and thought about Kira 7's grandmother. He thought about holding puzzles upside down. He thought about the beautiful towers of logic that kept falling down, and he began to wonder, what if the problem was not the answer? What if the problem was the question? The next day, Professor Velthrani announced something that made Marcus's heart beat faster. Next week, the professor said, I will present a special lecture on the Vanthari proof. This will be a demonstration of proper scientific methodology. I will show how the greatest minds approach an unsolvable problem. All students are encouraged to attend. He looked directly at Marcus as he said the word, greatest. Marcus did not look away. He wrote in his notebook, next week, Vanthari proof, special lecture. Then, beneath those words, he wrote something else. Something that made no logical sense. Something that felt like intuition and madness mixed together. He wrote, what if the question is wrong? After class, Velthrani stopped Marcus at the door. Human, the professor said. His crystalline skin was a cold blue. I know you have been spending time in the grand hall, looking at the proof. Let me give you advice. Do not embarrass yourself. This problem has been studied by minds far greater than yours. It will never be solved by a creature who will be dead before my next birthday. Marcus met the professor's silver eyes. When is your next birthday? In 412 years. Then I had better work quickly. Velthrani's skin flickered with colors Marcus could not identify. The professor said nothing more. He simply walked away, his robes flowing behind him like water. That night, Marcus sat with his notebook and began to draw. He did not draw equations. He drew shapes, loops, spirals, things that looked like a child's doodles. Kira 7 watched him with curiosity. What are you doing? I do not know, Marcus said. I am trying to see the problem differently. I am trying to turn the puzzle upside down. Is it working? Marcus looked at his strange drawings. Something was forming in his mind. Something that felt important. Maybe, he said. Maybe. The lecture hall was full in a way Marcus had never seen before. Word had spread that Professor Velthrani would discuss the Vanthari proof, and every student who could fit had come. But Marcus knew the truth. They had also come to see him fail. The professor had made his intentions clear in the days before the lecture. He had spoken openly about using this session to demonstrate the difference between true academic minds and the primitive pattern matching of lesser species. He never said Marcus's name. He did not need to. Marcus sat in the middle of the hall this time. Kira 7 sat beside him, her golden eyes watching everything with quiet attention. The seats around them remained empty, as always, but today this felt like a small island of calm in a sea of hostility. Velthrani stood at the center of the hall, his crystalline skin glowing with a proud violet light. Behind him, the Vanthari proof floated in holographic display, its equations moving and shifting like a living creature. Today, the professor began, we will examine the greatest unsolved problem in theoretical physics. The Vanthari proof has stood for 1,000 years. It has been attempted by 17 trillion researchers across 400 species. All have failed. Today, we will understand why. He gestured, and the hologram expanded. The equations grew larger, filling the hall with light and symbols. The proof seeks to unify all fundamental forces. This is the dream of physics. One equation, to explain everything. One truth beneath all truths. Velthrani's voice carried the weight of centuries. The approaches have been many. The Korthari developed recursive field theory. The Veluan created dimensional bridging mathematics. The Synth Collective processed every known combination of variables. The professor paused. His silver eyes swept across the audience. All failed. But not because we are not intelligent enough. No. We failed because the proof is designed to be unsolvable. It exists to remind us that some truths are beyond reach. It humbles us. Marcus felt something twist in his stomach. The professor was wrong. He was sure of it now. The problem was not designed to be unsolvable. The problem was simply being seen incorrectly. He opened his notebook and began to draw. Beltrami continued his lecture. He walked through the history of attempts. He showed beautiful mathematical structures that had collapsed. He demonstrated why each approach had failed, and with each example, he glanced at Marcus, as if daring him to challenge the wisdom of 1,000 years. An hour passed. 2 hours. Marcus did not look up. He drew loops and spirals. He wrote equations and crossed them out. He filled page after page with what looked like chaos. Beside him, Kira 7 whispered, "What are you doing?" "Turning it upside down," Marcus whispered back. Beltrami noticed the movement. He stopped his lecture and focused his attention on the human in the center of the hall. "Am I boring you, Deathworlder? Perhaps on your planet, 1,000-year-old mysteries are solved during afternoon meals?" Some students laughed. Others simply watched. Marcus looked up. His eyes were strange. They had the look of someone who is seeing something very far away. "No, Professor," he said. "You are not boring me. But I have a question." Beltrami's skin flickered with amusement. "A question? By all means, share your primitive thoughts with us." Marcus stood. His notebook was clutched in his hands. His heart was beating so fast he could feel it in his throat. But his voice was steady. The Vanthari proof assumes that unification must be elegant. It assumes that the fundamental forces must connect through a beautiful, symmetrical framework. Every approach has tried to find this beautiful connection. He paused. What if that assumption is wrong? The hall went silent. Beltrami's amusement faded. "Explain yourself." "The universe is not elegant," Marcus said. "At least, not in the way we want it to be. On my world, we have a concept called evolution. It creates solutions through chaos, through trial and error, through billions of years of things dying and surviving. The results are not beautiful. They are messy and strange and full of compromises. But they work." He walked forward, toward the holographic display. No one stopped him. "The Vanthari proof has been approached with elegance for 1,000 years. What if elegance is the problem? What if the fundamental forces do not connect through beauty? What if they connect through something ugly?" Beltrami's skin was shifting through colors rapidly now. "This is ridiculous. You are suggesting we abandon mathematical beauty. You are suggesting we embrace chaos. I am suggesting we look at the problem differently." Marcus reached the holographic display. He stared at the equations for a long moment. Then he began to speak. "The second term in the primary equation assumes symmetrical field decay. Everyone accepts this because it is beautiful. But what if field decay is not symmetrical? What if it is uneven, chaotic, and directional?" He began to write on the holographic board. His symbols were rough, almost ugly compared to the elegant mathematics around them. If we remove the symmetry assumption and replace it with a directional chaos variable, the equation changes. It becomes messier, but it also becomes solvable. The students began to murmur. Some were confused. Some were angry. Some were simply watching with wide eyes. Beltrami stepped forward. "This is nonsense. You cannot simply—" "Please," Marcus said. "Let me finish." Something in his voice made the professor stop. Marcus continued writing. For 30 minutes, he worked at the board. His handwriting was rough. His methods were strange. He made leaps of logic that should not have worked. He connected ideas that should not have connected. He tore through assumptions like a predator tearing through barriers. And slowly, the equations began to change. The Vanthari proof was designed with 17 primary terms. Marcus restructured 3 of them. He introduced 2 new variables that accounted for chaos rather than order. He rewrote the foundational assumptions in a way that was ugly, asymmetrical, and completely unlike anything in galactic mathematics. And then he wrote the final line. The equation balanced. The hall was absolutely silent. Marcus stepped back from the board. He was sweating. His hands were shaking. He looked at the completed proof and felt something between terror and joy. "The answer was not hidden," he said. "It was in plain sight. But no one could see it because everyone was looking for beauty. The universe is not beautiful. The universe is a survivor. It does what works, not what looks good." Beltrami stood frozen. His crystalline skin had stopped shifting. It had settled into a color Marcus had never seen before, a pale, almost white shade that seemed to drain all life from his features. "This cannot be correct," the professor whispered. Another professor, a Veluan mathematician, rose from the audience. Her silver fingers danced through calculations at inhuman speed. Her large black eyes grew wider with each second. "The equations balance," she said. Her voice was hollow with shock. "The proof is complete." The hall exploded into chaos. Students shouted questions and objections. Professors rushed toward the holographic display, their hands reaching for the equations as if trying to grab something physical. Some were angry, some were terrified. Some simply stared with expressions that might have been wonder. Kira 7 made her way through the crowd and stood beside Marcus. Her golden eyes were bright. "You did it," she said. Marcus looked at his hands. They were still shaking. "I broke it," he said. "I broke a 1,000-year-old problem. Is that not the same thing as solving it?" Marcus thought about this. Maybe. On Earth, sometimes they are the same thing. Velthrani approached. His skin was still that strange pale color. His silver eyes were fixed on Marcus with an expression that was impossible to read. "How?" the professor asked. His voice was barely a whisper. "You have lived 24 years. You have studied for weeks. How can you see what we could not see in 10 centuries? Marcus met his eyes. "Because I do not have 10 centuries, he said. "I have decades, maybe less. Every problem I face knowing that time is running out. So I cannot afford to be careful. I cannot afford to be elegant. I have to find the answer now. Whatever it takes, whatever rules I must break." He paused. "You built your science on beauty because you had time to wait for beautiful answers. Humans build on survival. We take the answer that works and worry about beauty later." Velthrani said nothing. Behind them, the solved Vanthari proof glowed on the holographic display. It was not beautiful. Its equations were messy and asymmetrical and strange, but it was true, and the galaxy would never be the same. The news traveled at the speed of light. Within hours of the lecture, every major information network in the galaxy carried the story. Within days, it was the only thing anyone was talking about. The headlines were everywhere, translated into 10,000 languages across 1,000,000 worlds. 1,000-year mystery solved by Deathworlder. Human student breaks Vanthari proof. The universe's ugliest solution. How a Terran changed physics forever. Marcus sat in Storage Bay 7 and watched the reports scroll across his datapad. His face was everywhere. His strange, asymmetrical equations were analyzed by experts on every station. Some called him a genius. Some called him a danger. Some simply called him impossible. Kira 7 brought him food because he had forgotten to eat. "You should see the campus," she said. "Reporters from 6 species are waiting outside. The administration does not know what to do with them. I do not want to talk to reporters. I know. But they are not going to leave." Marcus set down his datapad. He had not slept in 2 days. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw equations. He saw the look on Velthrani's face. He saw the pale, shocked expressions of creatures who had lived for centuries and had never been surprised. "This was supposed to be simple," he said. "I came here to learn, to prove that humans could contribute to galactic science. I did not mean to. To change everything?" "Yes." Kira 7 sat beside him. Her gray skin caught the dim light of the storage bay. "Is that a bad thing?" "I do not know. That is the problem. I solved a math problem, but no one is treating it like a math problem. They are treating it like a weapon." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What do you mean?" Marcus pulled up a report on his datapad. It was from a military analysis network, written by someone in the Galactic Defense Council. The Vanthari proof was not just a theoretical puzzle, he explained. The answer unlocks real technology. Energy manipulation, propulsion systems, power generation beyond anything currently possible. He paused. And weapons. Weapons that could destroy stars. Kira 7's golden eyes went wide. "They are afraid of you now," she said. "Not just because you are a Deathworlder. Because you showed them what Deathworlders can do." Marcus nodded slowly. "I broke a problem in one afternoon that the greatest minds in the galaxy could not break in 1,000 years. And I did it because my brain works differently. Because humans evolved to survive, not to think beautifully. That should be a good thing. Should be. But imagine you are a Korthari professor who has spent 400 years studying this problem. Imagine you have built your entire career on the elegant approaches that everyone agreed were correct, and then a creature with a lifespan shorter than your furniture comes along and tears everything apart in 2 hours. Marcus looked at her. You would not feel grateful. You would feel threatened. That night, the first calls for action began. A group of Korthari academics released a statement demanding that Marcus's proof be reviewed for errors. A Veluan political faction suggested that human students should be restricted from advanced theoretical courses, and in the darker corners of the galactic network, there were whispers of something worse. The Deathworlders cannot be allowed to advance further. Their minds are dangerous. Their methods are unstable. If one human can do this in weeks, what could billions of them do in years? 3 days after the lecture, Marcus received a message from the Galactic Academic Council. They wanted him to appear at a formal hearing. The stated purpose was to verify his proof. But Marcus read between the lines. They wanted to study him. They wanted to understand how he thought, and some of them wanted to find a way to make sure no human ever did anything like this again. Professor Velthrani came to see him that night. Marcus was sitting on his bed, staring at the wall, when the door chimed. He opened it and found the Korthari professor standing in the hallway. Velthrani's crystalline skin was dark blue, a color that Marcus had learned meant deep confusion. "May I enter?" the professor asked. Marcus stepped aside. Velthrani looked around the small storage bay. He saw the narrow bed, the small window, the walls that hummed with nearby machinery. His skin flickered with something that might have been shame. "They put you here," he said. "The greatest mind to visit this university in 1,000 years, and they put you in a closet." "I am a Deathworlder," Marcus said. "We are used to uncomfortable places." The professor was silent for a long moment. Then he sat down on the only chair in the room, a small metal seat that creaked under his weight. "I have studied the proof," Velthrani said. "I have analyzed every line. I have run every calculation." He looked at Marcus with his silver eyes. "It is perfect, ugly, strange, and completely perfect. Thank you. It is not a compliment. It is a fact." The professor's skin shifted to a lighter shade. "I have spent 400 years believing that beauty was the path to truth. You have shown me that survival is another path, perhaps a faster one." Marcus sat on his bed, facing the professor. "You came here to understand, to ask how I did it." "Yes. The answer will not satisfy you. Tell me anyway." Marcus thought for a moment. Then he spoke slowly, choosing his words with care. "On Earth, there is not time to be elegant. Our ancestors faced ice ages, famines, wars, and diseases. Every generation had to solve problems that should have killed them, and they could not wait for beautiful solutions. They needed answers that worked right now. Even if those answers were ugly." He paused. "Your species has lived for millions of years in safety. You developed science slowly, carefully, building beautiful structures over thousands of generations. You had the luxury of patience. We did not." Velthrani's skin flickered. "You are saying that your limitations are your strength. I am saying that desperation teaches things that comfort cannot. When you are dying, you do not care about elegance. You care about survival. And survival often looks ugly." The professor stood. He walked to the small window and looked out at the garbage processing facility. "The council is going to vote next week," he said. "There is a proposal to restrict human access to advanced education. They are calling it a safety measure. They are afraid of what else your species might discover." Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. "And what do you think?" Velthrani turned to face him. His crystalline skin was shifting through colors rapidly, emotions battling across his features. "I think," he said slowly, "that the galaxy has been standing still for too long. I think that we have mistaken comfort for progress. I think that 1,000 species have been looking at the same problems in the same ways, and finding nothing new, because we have forgotten how to be desperate." He walked to the door, then stopped. "I also think," he added, "that I was wrong about you, wrong about your species, wrong about everything I believed for 400 years. His skin settled into a color Marcus had never seen before, a warm gold that seemed to glow with its own light. "This is the Korthari color for humility. We do not show it often." Then he left. Marcus sat alone in Storage Bay 7. Outside, the galaxy was afraid of him. Politicians were planning restrictions. Scientists were questioning their life's work. Military strategists were drawing up new threat assessments. And somewhere, in the Grand Hall, His ugly, beautiful proof glowed in holographic light, changing everything. He picked up his notebook and began to draw again. Because the Vanthari proof was only the beginning. The equations had opened doors to new problems, new possibilities, new questions that no one had ever been able to ask before. And Marcus Chen, the Deathworlder, the mayfly among immortals, had less than 80 years to explore them all. He would have to work quickly. The Galactic Council chamber was built to make visitors feel small. It was a vast dome of living crystal, filled with floating platforms where representatives from 1,000 species gathered to make decisions that shaped the fate of the galaxy. Light poured down from above like judgment from the stars. Marcus stood alone in the center of the chamber. He wore his simple earth clothes. He had refused the formal robes that other speakers wore. If they wanted to judge a human, they would judge a human as he truly was. The vote on human restriction was scheduled for the end of this session. But first, by ancient tradition, the subject of any proposal had the right to speak. Marcus looked up at the sea of alien faces above him. Some were curious, some were afraid, some were angry, and somewhere, in a small section reserved for students, Kira 7 watched with her golden eyes full of worry. "Thank you for allowing me to speak," Marcus began. His voice carried through the chamber, translated into 1,000 languages. "I understand that many of you are afraid. I understand that what I did was unexpected and disturbing. But I ask you to listen, not as judges, but as thinkers, as scientists, as beings who once looked up at the stars and wondered." He paused. The chamber was silent. 1,000 years ago, a brilliant physicist named Vanthari posed a question. She asked, "How do all the forces of the universe connect?" For 10 centuries, the greatest minds in the galaxy tried to answer. They built beautiful theories. They developed elegant mathematics. They followed every path that logic and tradition told them to follow. Marcus turned slowly, meeting eyes across the chamber, and they all failed. Not because they were not smart enough, not because the problem was too hard. They failed because they were all looking for beauty. They assumed that the universe was elegant. They assumed that the answer would be symmetrical, balanced, and lovely. This assumption was never questioned because it was shared by everyone. He took a breath. "On my world, we have a saying. When everyone agrees, someone is not thinking. Humans evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every day. We learned that the universe does not care about beauty. It cares about survival. And survival is often ugly, chaotic, and strange." A murmur passed through the chamber. Marcus continued. "The Vanthari proof was solved not because humans are smarter than other species. We are not. It was solved because we think differently. We ask different questions. We break rules that others obey without asking why. This is not a threat. This is a gift." An ancient Korthari representative floated forward on his platform. "A gift?" His voice crackled with age and authority. "You solved a problem that unlocks weapons capable of destroying stars. You call this a gift? I call it knowledge," Marcus replied. "Knowledge is always dangerous. Fire is dangerous. Language is dangerous. Every great discovery in history could be used for good or evil. The question is not whether knowledge is dangerous. The question is whether we are wise enough to use it well." He looked directly at the old Korthari. "Your species has existed for 50,000 years. You have developed wisdom over ages that humans cannot imagine. But you have also developed something else. Fear. Fear of change. Fear of ideas that do not look the way you expect. Fear of creatures who think in ways you cannot predict." His voice grew stronger. "I stand here as proof that the galaxy has been limiting itself. For thousands of years, certain species have controlled certain fields of knowledge. The Korthari own physics. The Veluin own mathematics. The Synth own computation. And the rest, the lesser species, the young species, the species from harsh worlds, are expected to follow, not lead." Marcus pointed upward, toward a section where the Kiravari representative sat. "My friend Kira 7 is one of the most intuitive thinkers I have ever met. Her species has been classified as low intelligence because they do not think in straight lines. But who decided that straight lines are the only path to truth? Who decided that elegance is the only measure of worth?" The chamber was completely silent now. "You want to restrict human education because you are afraid of what we might discover. I understand this fear, but I ask you to consider, what else has the galaxy failed to discover because it was afraid to think differently? What problems remain unsolved because no one has been desperate enough, or strange enough, or ugly enough in their thinking to see the answer. Marcus lowered his arms. Humans will die in decades. Our lives are brief flashes in your long history. But perhaps that is exactly what the galaxy needs. Perhaps it needs beings who cannot afford to wait, beings who must find answers now, beings who will tear through beautiful assumptions because they do not have time to admire them. He stepped back. You can vote to restrict us. You can keep us away from your universities, your research centers, your great projects, and nothing will change. The galaxy will continue as it has for 10,000 years. Slowly, carefully, beautifully. His voice dropped to almost a whisper, but the acoustics of the chamber carried every word. Or you can let us in. Let us work beside you. Let us bring our desperation, our chaos, our ugly solutions to your elegant problems, and together, we might find answers that neither of us could find alone. He was finished. He bowed slightly and stepped back from the center of the chamber. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then, slowly, sounds began to fill the space. Murmurs, arguments, the rustle of 1,000 species debating the future. The vote took 3 hours. When the results were announced, Marcus was sitting in a small waiting room with Kira 7. They held hands and did not speak. The display on the wall showed the final count. Proposal to restrict human education. Rejected. Margin. 52% to 48%. It was not a great victory. Nearly half the galaxy had voted to lock humans out. But it was enough. It was a beginning. That night, there was a small celebration in Storage Bay 7. Marcus, Kira 7, and a handful of other students who had dared to befriend the Deathworlder gathered in the cramped space and shared food and stories. Professor Velthrani came. He looked out of place among the young students, his ancient crystalline form taking up most of the available space. But he stayed, and he listened, and once or twice, his skin glowed with that rare golden color of humility. "I have a proposal," the professor said, when the room had quieted. "The university has approved the creation of a new program. It will combine Korthari methodology with Terran intuition. It will accept students from species previously considered unsuitable for advanced study." He looked at Kira 7, including the Kiravari. Kira 7's golden eyes went wide. "You mean?" "I mean that you will be my student. You and Marcus both. If you accept." Marcus looked at his friend. Then he looked at the professor who had once despised him. The galaxy was vast and old and full of creatures who feared change. But here, in this small room, something new was beginning. "We accept," Marcus said. 6 months later, Marcus stood in a different lecture hall. This one was smaller, warmer, and filled with students who looked at him with curiosity rather than fear. Some were human. A dozen more had been admitted after the vote. Some were Kirivari and other species that had been overlooked for too long, and some were Korthari, Veluin, and Synth, young minds willing to learn a different way of thinking. Kira 7 sat in the front row, her datapad ready. Velthrani stood at the back, watching, and behind Marcus, displayed on the holographic board, the Vanthari proof glowed with all its ugly, beautiful truth. Beneath it, a single word had been added to the ancient plaque: solved. Marcus smiled at his students. "Welcome to Impossible Problems," he said. "My name is Marcus Chen. I am a human from Earth, a Class 7 Death World. I am 25 years old, and I have maybe 50 more years if I am lucky." He let that sink in. "In this class, we will not look for beautiful answers. We will not wait for elegant solutions. We will tear problems apart with our bare hands if we have to. We will make mistakes. We will look foolish. We will try things that do not work 100 times before we find something that does." He picked up a piece of chalk, an old earth tool that he had brought with him for this moment. "We will break things," he said. "And that is how we will find truth." He turned to the board and began to write. Behind him, the students of a dozen species opened their notebooks and prepared to learn a new way of thinking. Above them, the stars burned in the darkness, full of mysteries waiting to be broken open. And somewhere, deep in the heart of the galaxy, the old species whispered to each other about the Deathworlders who had come to change everything. Some whispered in fear, but some, a growing number, year by year whispered in hope.